software. So you could take somebody, a video.
The media. And let me, of course, first of all, thank you for coming here this Friday morning to cover this, what we consider to be a very, very important media conference. I think everybody is quite aware of the crime situation, and it's an issue that MSJ have been talking about for a very, very long time, ever since our inception. That has always been one of the critical issues we see facing Trinidad and Tobago, but we tend to have a different take on not just the cause of why we have such a high crime rate, but the response by the various governments. And so this morning, I mean, it's not a pleasant press conference to hold, in all honesty. It's a very, very difficult press conference. And between the period, and the real tragedy is that between when I sent out that press invite yesterday evening, and I do really thank you all for responding, because it did go out a little bit late, and I really thank you for responding in such an overwhelming way, I guess because we all recognize and feel the issue. But between when I sent that press release out to this morning, there were more murders. More people lost their life in this Twin Island Republic. So it is a difficult press conference to hold, and but it is a topic which the MSJ have been talking about, as I said, for a while. And this morning we would like to make our clear statement with regards to not just the recent murders, but put those murders in the context of crime in Trinidad and Tobago. So I will now turn over to our political leader, David Abdullah, who will give the official MSJ response with regards to crime in Trinidad and Tobago.
And let me join Ozzy in thanking you for coming out at such short notice to this morning's media conference. First, let me extend condolences on behalf of the MSJ to the families and friends of all of those persons who have been killed from the start of 2018. We were trying to, a moment ago, do a very quick, count of those persons who have been murdered tragically. And the number is somewhere between, I think, 115 and 120, and so on, which is just absolutely horrific and unacceptable. And we can no longer be in a situation in Trinidad and Tobago where we don't care about violent crime or take it now for granted. There's the view that in terms of the psychology of people, that if things keep happening and so on, then you become immune to the images or to the reality around you. And certainly as a society, we cannot become immune or insensitive to what is taking place in Trinidad and Tobago today. And of course, in particular, let me extend condolences to the families and friends, and in fact to the entire community of Sobo and Labre and so on, who lost a colleague, a loved one, a family member. And I'm referring, of course, to the murders that took place a few days ago of Mr. Michael Scott, and to Abigail Chapman and her daughter Olivia, and Olivia's school friend Michaela Mason. We understand, for example, that Abigail Chapman was not just a school teacher and a mother of three, but she was also very active in community building through her church and also through the coaching, cricket coaching of youngsters. She was a West Indies Players Association community outreach cricket coach. And I had some connection with Reaper some years ago when that coaching program started up. So that, indirectly, I could recognize the fact that this was a young woman who was not just seeing and being concerned about her children and her immediate family, but was seeing about the welfare and being concerned about the children of her community through sport, which is a very positive thing. And Michael Scott was somebody that I knew personally. Let me say before that there are many members of the MSJ in Sobo and in Labre. And We have members who are related, are cousins, and so on. We have members who go to church with some of these persons who knew them well, and so on. So there are many to the MSJ family who have lost a friend or a family member. Let me also say that we're in solidarity with you. And Michael Scott, of course, was somebody I knew personally, quite apart from being at university with me, though we were not connected over time, but from time to time he would call and speak with me when I was the head of the Education Research Department. And in 2006, he actually asked me to do a lecture on globalization to his Form 6 students, which I delivered on the 16th of February. And they gave me the certificate of appreciation, which I've framed as it is, and it's been hanging in my office. It was at my OWTU office and in my MSJ office after my retirement from OWTU. And you can see in the middle his name, Michael L.J. Scott. Coordinator was also signed by the principal, Miss Janice Clifford, and by the student representative, Miss Swati Maharaj. And you know, this was just a way that Scotty tried to help students in what we popularly know in South as ModSec. And he helped students not only as their teacher, history teacher, but sixth form students who were dealing with, at that time it may have been the general paper. In 2006, I don't think it was at Cape, so it would have been general paper, and economic students who had to come to grips with issues of globalization and structural adjustment and matters like that. And he would bring in guest lecturers who he thought would add a different dimension of understanding to the expert teachers that would have been on the faculty of San Fernando Government Secondary School. And that was the kind of person he was. He was also active in Labyrinth Nightingales, which has developed into a very significant community steel band, and highly respected and recognized in the pan world, getting to the Panorama semifinals and finals on a number of occasions. So we have in Trinidad and Tobago, these different types of crimes, if you wish, and I want to categorize them in the sense of 3 or 4 different types of crimes. One is gang-related, one is about robberies and incidents like that that also result in people being shot and wounded and killed, some gang-related, some not gang-related. So there are violent crimes that are organized as part of criminal activity to enrich or whatever individuals, or with respect to control of power, influence of gangs, and so on. And that is one category of violent crime. Then you have some crimes which are committed violently in the heat of the moment. 2 or 3 friends liming and drinking, and some argument gets out of control, and somebody picks up a chair and hits somebody, or a piece of wood and hits somebody over the head, which is just purely spontaneous, a crime of immediate passion, if you wish. And of course, those crimes, there's no way that one can prevent that other than try to get people to understand that violence is not a way to resolve disputes, no matter how heated they are. And those are the ones that the police find easiest to solve, because it's an immediate thing. 3 or 4 people lying, everybody knows who hit whom over the head, and so on, or stab somebody with a bottle. Then there's a third type of violent crime, which is domestic violence, into which this category of the 4 people in Labre being killed will fall. Now, these acts of domestic violence, again, it's not as if the police have information about criminal gangs. This is not, anti-gang legislation doesn't deal with this type of violent crime. And what we want to say is that there are clear gaps and weaknesses in addressing the issue of what we call domestic violence, where someone makes a report to the police, may, in some instances, have the occasion to go to the court and get a restraining order, which restraining order has no impact on stopping an individual from carrying out an act of violence against a loved one. So those are some of the different types of categories. And I want to say that in this case, the report from Ms. Chapman's mother was that this individual threatened her daughter Abigail, in fact went to the house and not only threatened but was becoming physically violent and abusive to her daughter. And it was Mr. Scott who intervened in that situation and helped to avert something more serious happening. This was been several days before the actual murder took place. And Ms. Chapman then, from reports, went to the police station and made a report. And then nothing happened. And then 4 people were killed. So quite clearly, we have a complete absence of response to persons who feel that their life is being threatened and in danger. And we have time and time again seen women and children being killed in circumstances which could have been avoided if the person who committed that act had been detained by the police. Now, the police may claim that if there's a report made and there has been no actual assault, they cannot effect an arrest. I am today calling, on behalf of the MSJ, on our legislators to immediately bring legislation and for the Commissioner of Police to create the resources to ensure that when a report has been made of a threat on a person's life, a woman makes a threat that someone makes a report that a threat has been made on her life or the life of her children, that immediately that should trigger an investigation. Immediately trigger an investigation. The person against whom the report has been made ought to be detained, and evaluations done by police and trained psychologists and so on to ensure that if that person is deemed a danger, if that person is assessed to be someone who can carry out a violent act, that that person immediately be committed to an institution for care and treatment to ensure that they do not then go out and commit a crime. It is not enough to say to a woman that they should get out of an abusive relationship or that they should not start a relationship with somebody because they're not sure if that person will become abusive. Because it is not always possible, in many cases not possible, to know beforehand whether someone is going to become violent and abusive in a relationship or violent and abusive when a relationship comes to an end. And therefore, we have to have some additional measures to address this situation, to avoid 2 people, 1 person, 4 people being killed in the way in which those murders took place in Sobo earlier this week. And if we can, therefore, prevent people from being killed, because many people are talking about what should happen to the person after the murder has happened, that hanging should take place and so on and so on. But that is not going to help the 4 people who were killed. We are therefore making proposals to try to create a preventative response by the police. And we don't believe that the police have been responding proactively to prevent these murders. And if there's a legislative gap, we are saying as a matter of urgency, in the same way the government wanted anti-gang legislation as a matter of urgency to deal with gangs, we need legislation as a matter of urgency. And all members of parliament have to put aside party differences and all kind of stuff like that and act in the interest and well-being of those who are most vulnerable in our society. There was an incident in Tobago where a young teacher, early childhood education teacher, moved out of a home, moved in to a friend's home, got out of an abusive relationship, I think had a restraining order perhaps as well, and still was murdered. So we are saying that you need to ensure that persons against whom a report has been made are taken out of a situation where they could cause harm to others once they are assessed as being a potential danger and someone who could potentially commit a crime of violence and so on. And yes, we have to strengthen our whole emphasis in the society on the question of violence in general. We need to have, let me back up and say it, it's no use talking about violence in schools and we should expel children and do this, that, and the other, and so on, when we are not dealing with the causes of our children and adults being violent. And the psychologists will say, and I've listened to people like Dr. Diane Douglas and others, and criminologists like Rennie Cummings and so on, and Anna Marie Mora, and many other persons. And what they're saying is that there is a lot of pent-up anger and pain in citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And unless we have programs that address people's anger and pain, that will those emotions will be expressed oftentimes in acts of violence and so on. And so we need our schools to have from early childhood level, because it has been shown, there have been scientific studies where children who are very early, 2-3 years old, in a violent environment at home, and violence isn't only physical violence, it could be verbal violence as well, how children are treated and so on, the way in which they're spoken to, the way in which they're punished and so on and so on. Acts of violence against children from birth to 3, 4, 5 years has a lasting impact on how they respond to situations of anger and pain and frustration in later life. And there are scientific studies that have shown that. So we have to have a massive, massive program of addressing the culture of violence in Trinidad and Tobago. And we are saying that those are two things that have to be addressed. In other forums, we will address things like the gang violence and other things like that, but that's a different dimension, and I don't want us to shift focus from what we want to address, which can be done immediately, we believe. Massive program of addressing the culture of violence in the society, and we need more social workers in our schools. I was talking with a school teacher from Labre 2 Sundays ago, and she was talking about the challenges that they have as a primary school teacher, early childhood education teacher in the schools, and children coming from environments that are not conducive to learning and so on, and they need more support and that kind of thing. And we have to find the resources in the country, because there are resources in this country. We have to find the resources to address these issues about that impact upon the lives of people. There's nothing more important than addressing how people live and how our children are growing up, because if we don't do that, then we are going to get more incidents like Labre, or what happened on High Street, or regrettably what happened in Pleasantville, or Gasparillo, or wherever else last night. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, members of the media.
Okay, you spoke about changing the legislation, right? But do you think that on a whole domestic violence is taken seriously in this country, or seriously enough?
No, it isn't. If it was taken seriously enough, then steps would have been taken to ensure that we don't have someone making a report that their life has been threatened, and then no action is taken against that individual, and then the life is taken.
Okay, but Do you think that that is enough, just making a report is enough for the police to step in and arrest someone? Because what about the cases of false reports?
Well, that is, the police will then have to do this investigation to determine whether, that's what I'm saying, you're not going to arrest a person and put that person in jail, in remand yard or something like that. That person now has to be detained and a proper investigation done and a psychological evaluation, social workers, whoever else is required in terms of professionals and so on, to do an assessment and to determine on the basis of that assessment whether that person is a threat or not. Now, it could turn out that the professional assessment is that the person is not a threat, and then very unfortunately something happens afterwards. But at least we have to have a process of investigation. At the moment, there is no process of investigation unless an actual physical assault, and then the person may be arrested for assault, they may come out on their own bail, as the case may be, and so on, and then a week afterwards they could commit the violent act.
Okay.
A restraining order is taken out, but the restraining order is not a physical barrier. It simply says that you must not approach that person. But when the person is walking down the road, we've had instances where perpetrators have gone into a person's workplace and killed, I think it was earlier this year, was it? A woman was killed in her business place. A security guard, was it? I'm trying to remember the details. But people have been killed in the workplace and so on, even in the situation of a restraining order.
Okay, but you said that investigations need to go on, right? But according to Acting Superintendent Michael Chapman yesterday, he said that the police were investigating the matter. It's just a case of that the person was able, because they couldn't find the person to conduct the investigations, but however, it was just a case of the person perpetrating the act before they got a chance for due process. So you think that they should really relook at that process?
Well, in a situation like that, what has to happen is that if the police can't find the person, then the police have to take steps to protect the life or lives of those against whom a threat has been made. You can't say, okay, we can't find the person. You know, there's a sense of abdication of responsibility in this country that we have to put an end to. Yes?
Yeah.
So, whether it is white-collar crime, whether it is Chief Justice, whether it is government, opposition, police, Integrity Commission, there's an President of the Republic, there's an abdication of responsibility all around. And therefore, if a report has been made, can't find the perpetrator or the alleged perpetrator of that against whom the report has been made, then what you going to do? Just let it go like that? And then cry down tears, and the Commissioner of Police said, well, we want to extend condolences and we deeply regret. Regret can't cut it any longer. Not good enough. Protect the individual.
Any other questions?
Yes, David.
Related to this issue?
No. I know this is going to be us. We have a very pressing situation lying in the domain here, right? And that is with his Chief Justice and his sabbatical leave, and now the Prime Minister is sending this thing to the court through the Attorney General. We haven't heard anything from the MSJ. Just give us a second little piece of story here on the side.
Well, we have made statements on the CJ issue not once but more than once in the past. We haven't said anything since the sabbatical leave issue came up, which was last few days, right? But two things. One is that the Prime Minister said that they're going to get the courts to determine whether or not judges are entitled to sabbatical leave, okay? We will allow the court to determine whether in truth and in fact judges are entitled to sabbatical leave, because I don't have, there's a gray area, quite clearly there's a gray area. We don't have all the facts. So we have to let the court determine that, apparently. But it's very unfortunate that you have major institutions, in this case the judiciary, where the there is doubt about what the entitlements of judges are, right? Whether it is vacation leave, whether it is sabbatical leave, that says something very significant about the collapse of our institutions in Trinidad and Tobago. And it reiterates, if you wish, or reinforces the case that the MSJ has made with respect to the collapse of our national institutions, which institutions were set up by the first Republican Constitution of 1976, which is why we are saying that we need a second republic where these institutions of state are reformed and modernized so that they can in fact serve the interests of all the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago fairly and equitably and so on. Yeah.
I mean, no, it hasn't been to the court as ever. You can't
no, because I don't. If the Prime Minister not sure and the Chief Justice not sure, it means that the courts will have to determine. The point I'm making is that it ought not have to get to the court. These things should be absolutely clear for everybody. And if they're not clear, it means that our institutions of state are not working. Yeah? Okay.
All right, if there are no more questions, I'd like to once again thank members of the media and just to re-emphasize the point that our political leader has made, especially that last point about the failure of the collapse of the institutions of state. And the collapse of the institution of state manifests itself in different ways. And to link it back to the subject of this particular press conference is that it manifests itself in our culture of violence. So I'd like to thank members of the media and hope you have a pleasant and safe afternoon going into the weekend. I'd just like to announce as we are here that we will be hosting another press conference on Sunday at 10 a.m. I thought that you all felt relieved that okay, if they're having it on Friday morning, then that means the Sunday morning press conference is not happening. But there's another very important issue actually that is happening right next door to us that can have major implications for Trinidad and Tobago. I think that's key. So it's not just that it's in a foreign land, but it's a foreign land that is a neighbor, but will have major implications for Trinidad and Tobago. We'll make a statement about that on Sunday. Okay, so thank you and have a pleasant